Good morning, guys. Um, Let me know if you can hear me. Hey, guys. I don't know if you guys have access to the chat, but if you can hear me, just drop your name in the chat, and you know, let's get ourselves introduced here. Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Glad to have you all here this morning. If you can hear me, just drop your name in the chat so we can go get introduced here. Hello, Eva. I see you in the chat. Um, so in the chat, you're able to also drop questions there. So while I'm speaking, if there's any question you have on any particular point of this, just drop that in the chat and then we'll address those questions here. All right, great. Um, Please also put mention um, your current location so for everybody can know where you're listening from. So I see we have two people, we have four people viewing. We have Israel here. So just put your name and where you're tuning in from in chat. I'm currently calling from Dublin, Ohio. Currently based in Dublin, Ohio. Um, so I'd love to know where everybody else is also tuning in from. So today I'll be looking to share my story on how I applied for a master's program, how I got into NYU, um, the visa process for me, the full scholarship and everything up until graduation and post graduation, what that experience has been like as an international student here in the US. And hopefully I'll be able to answer um, some questions on how you can also apply for a master's program and get it done. So we see Eva is tuning in from Seattle, Washington State. We have Israel here from Lagos. Israel, nice to have you on the call today. So before we go into this, does anybody has any prepared questions that they wanted to ask so you can get out of the way before the webinar itself starts? If you have any questions you already have in your mind to ask today, you could just do them in the chat. We could kick it off by addressing those questions, and then once more people tune in, um, we can then start the seminar. All right, so it's 5 past 9 US time, 5 past 2 p.m. So we'll just go ahead and kick it off here. So starting off, a lot of people would like to go abroad for their masters, possibly the US, Canada, London, Ireland, Norway, or even Asia. A lot of Nigerians find their way to Canada, the UK, or US. I personally have experience applying to both Canadian and US schools, and I have an idea of what the process is for both of them are very similar. But I'll go ahead to just share as much as I can, and we'll get through that. Okay, so we have one question here from Eva. How do you get full funding for a master's or MBA as an international student? All right, so we're diving into the thick of things. So first of all, there's a lot of funding opportunities available. Most of them are provided by international organizations. The others are provided by the schools themselves. So speaking about my particular case, my full scholarship was provided by a fund at NYU Engineering School called African Opportunity Scholarship Fund. And what they do every year, they select four international students from Africa to give this scholarship to. Two of those students are going to get a full ride, 100% covered scholarship, and the other two are going to get a 50% covered scholarship. I was one of the two students in my set that got the 100% full ride scholarship. And speaking for NYU, what NYU does, which NYU Tandon in the engineering school does, which I very much appreciate them for, is they actually check every single application for matches to scholarship within the school. So when you apply to NYU Engineering School, within the graduate admissions office, there's a financial aid person, Um, Her name is Pamela Martinetti. And what she and her team does is that for every single applicant, they cross-reference their catalog of NYU scholarships to see what scholarship you might be suitable for, and then they award to the students who qualify for such scholarships. One of the more widely spread scholarships at NYU Engineering School is the Merit Scholarship. The Merit Scholarship ranges from anywhere between 6,000 a year, $6,000 a year to about $12,000 a year, and is given to students based off the strength of the applications. So most times they look at how many your educational qualifications, your work experience, and the overall strength of the application. And if your merit score is high, then they give you a merit scholarship equivalent to your merit score. So going back to the question of how to get a full funding for your scholarship, the one point which I'll break down in this process is having a strong application. For most scholarships, or for some scholarships, they'll require you to have an interview for that particular scholarship fund. But for many schools like NYU, the application you put in is the only thing that they would use to go off in awarding a full scholarship. In either case, even with an interview phase, a strong application is what gets you to even being considered in an interview for the scholarship. So we'll be breaking down what a strong application looks like, the element of an application, and how you should go across each of those applications. So different schools have different requirements, but I'm just going to go over a generic list of requirements. One, they're going to ask for your educational experience, or your educational document, transcripts, and degree or proof of degree. I'm going to ask for work experience, optional. If it's not available, it's fine. They're going to ask for letters of recommendation. In most cases, they accept just academic, and in some other cases, they accept both academic and professional letters of recommendation. So from people you work with as a professional, or from your school in that case. So you have your educational document, proof of degree, transcript. You have your letters of recommendation, two, and then three. The next thing you need is your standardized test scores. So your standardized test scores could be either GRE or GMAT, depending on if it's a master's or MBA program. Most MBA programs prefer a GMAT to a GRE. And then your second standardized test score is going to be a test for proof of English proficiency. Now, most schools, especially in Canada, are now beginning to waive this requirement for students from Nigeria, since Nigeria is an English speaking country. And there are several of these standardized test scores that show proof of English proficiency. One of the most common ones is the TOEFL and the IELTS. They are both widely accepted across many schools. In fact, they are the two that almost every single school accepts. Now, during COVID 2020, we noticed there was a number of schools that began to accept Duolingo English test scores as a proof of English proficiency, because the standardized test scores like IELTS and TOEFL were not available during COVID. So we have, just to go over it again, we have your educational qualifications, which is your transcripts and or proof of degree. We have your letters of recommendation, which could be from academic or professional settings. We have your standardized test scores. The first one is going to be GRE or GMAT. And then we have your test for a proof of English proficiency, which could be IELTS or TOEFL, or in some cases, Duolingo English test scores. Now, the one other thing that is always very important, most people overlook it, most people don't, is your statement of purpose, or in most schools, they call it an essay, your application essay. So these four things together need to paint a story of who you are as an individual applying to this school. Now, In terms of the schools you apply to, I'm going to break it down into a couple of different categories. We have the Ivy League schools, which is Princeton's, Harvard's, um, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, etc. Then we have the top schools, the top 10 or top 50% schools. They're not quite Ivy League, but they have a lot of reputation, reputable alumni. We're talking about like NYU, for example, Ohio State University, etc. So these are like high-end schools, but are not Ivy League. And then we have like state university, like New York State University, and other state universities like Pennsylvania State, Penn State University, and then we have like community colleges. So when you look at like the first two groups of schools, the top schools are not Ivy Leagues and the Ivy Leagues. The one thing they thrive on in attracting new students in is reputable alumni. When you see MIT and you see the kind of people that are MIT graduates, and like if you look at Harvard, that even Harvard dropouts are not like reputable people, it gives a lot of reputation to the school. So what the schools try to do is they try to recruit people to the school that have a leadership potential and impact potential. So these are the top two things like the top schools look for. We want to get people in our schools that when they leave here, they are going to make an impact on the world and help us bring more students back in. Now, how does this tie back in to your application? Your whole application needs to show leadership potential from the start to the end, meaning what you're saying in what is being said about you in your letters of recommendation needs to tie correctly or needs to correspond with what you say about yourself in your letter of or statement of purpose or essay, and it needs to have some context with your educational qualification and standardized test scores. I'll use myself for example. When I was applying to NYU, I applied to NYU for mechanical engineering with the aim of specializing in linear and control systems and mechatronics. And prior to getting to NYU for my undergrad degree, I had studied mechanical engineering. My final year project was a drone that I designed and built from scratch, which kind of showed my passion and expertise in mechatronics. When my letter of recommendations were written, my supervisor from my first degree, from my undergrad, wrote about how I've always been passionate about building drones, how I built a drone for my final year project. And when I wrote my statement of purpose, I also included social impact initiatives that I had done. So prior to applying to NYU, I had started a drone community in Nigeria called Smart Builders Club, where I was teaching people about drone technology and how to build drones for free. I put them in the WhatsApp and I would share materials and hold online sessions. In addition, in addition to that, the other thing I did at the time was I had started the first drone recreational outlets on the continent of Africa in Lagos, Nigeria in 2018. So those two things added color to my personality. So when people are reviewing your case, especially are reviewing candidates that they would like to give a full scholarship to, they want to know who are you beyond your resume. Because your resume can have all the fancy degrees and all the high GPAs and everything, but they need to know who you are as a person. What drives you? Are you a change maker? Are you somebody that is headed or passionate about making an impact in your immediate surrounding, your immediate community? So those things together makes puts together for a strong application. And when all those four things are in sync, then you have a pretty good or a very strong application. I'm nothing about the application that gives you an edge for scholarship is apply early. The earlier you apply, the higher your chances of one, getting in, two, getting a scholarship. because the scholarships are awarded on what I believe is a rolling basis for like a merit scholarship. For other scholarships, they have a certain number of people that they probably have time to review. Plus, the sooner you apply, it means they have a lighter backload so they can get the time to really understand who you are and make an assessment based on that, as opposed to just taking it very casual and putting you on a wrong pile or not giving it enough thought when reviewing your application. So it is key to apply early. And another one, the topic of applications, the important thing I want to talk about is there are two main semesters that international students get accepted for. They might be called slightly different things in the US versus Canada, but they're ideally the same things. So in the US, we have the fall and spring semester. In Canada, it's called the fall or autumn and winter semester. Now, the fall semester is the educational semester we're all used to starting if you're from Nigeria, which is the semester that starts early September and runs to the end of the year or early the next year. That's the fall semester. The next semester is the spring or winter semester. In the US, it's called the spring semester. In Canada, it's called the winter semester. But it's the semester that starts late January and runs till about April or early May. So those are the two core semesters you want to apply to. And the application seasons for these semesters open as early as, in some cases, 6 months in advance. So, for example, fall semester for this year, so fall 2023 applications are already open right now. And in most cases, they've been open since February. So fall 2023 applications are open right now. And spring for next year application will be open like late August this year or early September. So applying early with a strong application, it's very key into getting accepted into a top school for your master's program or MBA and also securing a scholarship. So I'm going to go over and recount my own story, my own experience, and feel free to drop any questions you have about whatever I am saying, I have said, or any premeditated questions you already have. So going over to my story. So I studied mechanical engineering, as I mentioned earlier, from Lamak University in Nigeria, and I graduated in 2017 with a first class degree from Lamak University. And then I went to NYSC late 2017 all through 2018. So the other part is applying for a master's program is a full-time job. You have to be committed to it. Most people use agents for that process. I didn't, and you don't have to use an agent. You can definitely do it all by yourself, from the beginning to the end, and it's pretty straightforward, and I can help in guiding where possible. So going to my story, I used the entire 2018 as my application year. And the fun fact is, although I ended up in the US, my initial target was Canada. So I started off applying to Canadian schools, and most Canadian schools didn't require GRE. So I applied to University of Waterloo, University of Manitoba, and University of Toronto. And I think I got into the final stages of all three. And then the course I wanted to do, they said they were going to consider domestic applicants first, because I wanted to do mechatronics and I wanted to do research based. So I wanted to do course based, sorry. So they said I have to do research based. So I changed my application to research based so I can qualify for grants. And this is another thing about masters. For some schools, they have two master paths. You could do a research-based master's or a course-based master's. And in some cases, you can mix both together. So for the Canadian schools I applied to, the awards and grants were mainly available or had like deeper pockets for master students that were going the research-based route. And this was for the schools I applied to in Canada. So I switched to a research-based because of that. And when I got to the final stages where I started speaking to the director of admissions for University of Toronto, it ended up being that they were going to consider domestic applicants first for the research base, particularly because of the funding. And when they did that, I no longer made the cut. I had already been given like a preliminary admission at University of Toronto. So and this happened between April and May 2018. So going to my standardized test scores, I wrote both tests in 2018. The GRE lasts for 5 years. The IELTS, which I wrote, lasts for 2 years. So it is valid for applications or for use within a 2-year period for the IELTS and a 5-year period for the GRE. I wrote my GRE in April of 2018, and I wrote my IELTS in August of 2018. When I wrote my GRE in April, on the day of the test, they give you free slots, 4 slots, to send your scores to 4 schools of your choice, particularly in the US. So what I did was I had a list of 4 schools that I wanted to send my scores to. So I sent my scores to NYU, I sent my scores to MIT, I sent my scores to Carnegie Mellon University, and I think I sent my scores to University of Texas, Austin. And then I pretty much forgot about my New York application, my US application, because I was helping from Canada. Now, fast forward to September of 2018, I was like, you know what, let me just, that was when the spring 2019 applications opened. So I started an early application. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention. The applications to these schools have an application fee. It ranges from anywhere from $20, $25 to $100 something for the application fee. Now, the good news is that almost all of these schools have application fee waivers, which you can use to apply to these schools. What I'm also going to do is that for NYU Tandon, I'm going to share with people on this call in the chats for people that are actually live. I'm going to share in the chat the application waiver fee for NYU Tandon. So you all can have that and apply for free if you're applying to NYU Tandon School of Engineering. So during the application process, please keep an eye out for application fee waivers. 10 out of 10, you almost always get it once you apply for it. There is no shame in asking for a waiver. It has no negative impact on your application. The schools just want the best candidates to get to their schools, and they are willing to take away as much obstacles from the application process that will get you to a complete application. So back to my story. As of October, I had started my application process. I got an application fee, and I had spent maybe a few $100 on my Canadian applications. So I wasn't enthusiastic about applying to NYU. And then in October of 2018, NYU sends me an email, and they're like, we received your GRE scores, we like them, we looked at our system, and we haven't seen an application for the coming session. Please apply. So I went up and I picked up my NYU application. I got all the documents, my letter of recommendation, my SOP, my transcript, my proof of degree, my statement of purpose, everything, my IELTS test scores, and I added it in. And I looked about IELTS test scores. There are 2 types. There's the general and the academic. Academic is mainly for academic purposes. General can be used for everything. Academic is slightly higher, general is not. Most schools would accept the general which allows to have a higher test score and still meet the criteria. While very few schools are particular about an academic test score from IELTS. I did the general and I scored almost 100% on it. I had an 8.5 on a scale of 9. And that was what I used in applying to NYU. So it's okay in most cases to apply to write a general IELTS. The advantage there is that you can use that for immigration purposes if you're applying to Canada for a skilled workers program, and you can also use it for other purposes like applying to schools for your masters. So I recommend to check with the schools you're applying to, but to save cost, so you don't have to do two different IELTS scores. If you have plans to immigrate to Canada, you could just do the general. So NYU later reached out to me, and the NYU sent me an application fee waiver because the deadline was about to close and I hadn't submitted my application. So they waived application fee for me and I applied to NYU for free. Fast forward to January 11th, 2019, I got an email from the head of a mechanical engineering telling me school is resuming in 3 weeks and you have not yet paid your school fees. So I assumed it was a message in error. So I replied to Professor Sahin and I said, I applied to NYU. I haven't received an offer letter yet. So I'm not sure if this is a mistake. And he said he was going to rectify it. And in 24 hours or less, I got my offer, which somehow got stuck in their system. So I got my NYU offer. And my initial NYU offer, which most people don't know, didn't come with the full scholarship. It came with just a $6,000 a year merit scholarship. So I got this information on January 11th, and by January 25th, the semester was starting. So I had roughly 2 weeks to get my I-20 documents from NYU to Nigeria, apply for my visa, get the visa, prepare to travel, and travel in just 2 weeks. It was very close deadline. So for those of you who don't know what the I-20 is, the I-20 is a document you receive from your school after you've gotten an admission that you would need for the rest of your stay in the US as an international student. You need it to go for your visa interview. You need it when you're entering the US. You need it for when you're traveling from the US or to the US. So it's a very important document. And prior to COVID, they only sent hard copies. Then before 2020, they never sent electronic copies of your I-20. So for me in Nigeria, I had to wait for NYU to mail my I-20 via UPS to Lagos, Nigeria, where I got it. And I almost didn't get it in time for my visa interview, but I ended up getting it. So there are two types of documents related to I-20. There is the I-20, which is for people applying for an F1 visa. And there's the other one called the DS 2019, which for people applying for a J1 visa. I'll briefly just go into the differences between both visas. They are both student visas, or they both can be student visas. The F1 is purely a student visa, which is what most students require. The J1 is a type of student visa or study visa that is more tuned to people that are coming for vocational studies as opposed to academic studies in that sense. So for me, I was going for an F1 visa, which is why I had to apply for an I-20. And in NYU's case, in order to get an I-20 from them, you have to apply for the I-20 and send over things like your proof of funds, who you'll be staying with, and other information. And once you send that over to NYU goes through them, and it's relatively easy, and they send you your I-20. Also, you also have to pay an acceptance fee for almost every school to claim your admission slots. Because if you don't claim at a particular time, they will give your slot to people that applied late. So people that apply will basically get like the leftover slots, which is why it's always important to apply early and pay for your acceptance fee to claim your slots. So by this point, I had paid my $500, I had claimed my slot, I had gotten my I-20, I had filled in my DS-160, which is the form for a visa application, and I scheduled my visa application. A little bit about visa application. It is broken down into three parts for F1 student visas. The first part of the visa, the first part of the visa interview, is to determine if you're actually going to study. And for each section of the interview, they ask you on average 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 3 questions, and the interview lasts anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. It's a very short interview. It's over before you know it. So there are three sections. The first section is to determine if you're going to actually study, intent of travel. The second segment of the interview is to determine capacity, like do you have the funds to travel and sustain yourself in the US without being a liability to the US government. And the third segment of the interview is to determine if you're going to return back to your home country once you're done. And they'll ask you 2 or 3 questions, and then maybe in a separate call, we can go deeper into the interview process and preparing your visa process and all that. But long story short, I didn't get denied my interview the first time. I didn't get accepted. I got put on what they call administrative processing. Now, administrative processing is supposed to be a rare occurrence, but it happens to me. It happened to me 3 out of 3 times in my visa process, and it's basically them saying, "You look okay on the interview, but we are still not sure, so we want to do some checks." And when I did more research about this, it mostly happens to people in STEM fields. So I was applied for mechatronics, and mechatronics is part of the areas that they have what we call prevention of technology exports. So there's some fields where the US is wary of letting knowledge or technology in that field fall into the wrong hands in any capacity. And this has been in existence since 2001, when Osama bin Laden bombed the World Trade Center after being a trained US personnel. So prevention of technology exports. So that was why I got put on administrative processing. After about 2 days of that processing, I eventually got rejected. I went, and usually you're supposed to apply. So when I got rejected, I couldn't make the start date for the spring semester. So I deferred my admission. So if for any reason after you accept your admission offer, you're not able to make the start date, you're not able to make the trip, you can defer your admission, meaning you can say, I want to resume in the next semester. So for me, I deferred my admission from spring 2019 to fall of 2019. And all of this happened in January. Now, in February, the actual applications for fall 2019 opened up. And this is why I said the earlier you apply, the higher your chances of getting a scholarship or an admission. So once the portal for fall 2019 opened up, because I had already deferred to fall, mine was already on the list of people that got admitted for fall. So I was already on track to being checked for a scholarship. And I was so lucky and surprised because at that point, I had no idea that NYU had this scholarship opportunity. So late February, about 2 weeks after the application portal opened up, I received an email from NYU saying I had been selected for the African Opportunity Scholarship Award, which was a full ride on my tuition, as well as a graduate assistant position at the university graduate admissions office. So while I was at NYU, I worked in the graduate admissions office. And in that office, I helped students with their applications. I answered phone calls and emails for students that were trying to apply to NYU Engineering School, which is kind of why I have like a deeper knowledge or experience about the whole application process, having worked in an admission office for almost 2 years. So when I got that, I quickly reapplied for my visa, and I put the second application date in May of 2019. My first 2 visa interviews were both in Lagos. So I went back for the visa interview, and this time again, the same format, but during the first segment of the interview, instead of me asking me questions like, why are you going to NYU? Why did you choose NYU? For some reason, he started asking me mechanical engineering questions like, what is tensile stress? And what is tensile force? And what is centrifugal force and centripetal force? I guess he was an engineer or something. But I answered those questions correctly. And then for the second time in a row, I got put on administrative processing again in May. This time, it wasn't there for 2 days, it was there for about 2 weeks. Now, after 2 weeks of administrative processing, I kept checking the portal, and one day I checked and it was denied. And every time they put you on administrative processing, they hold on to your passport. And normally, they only hold on to your passport when they're about to stamp a visa. So administrative processing is like you're in the middle. They haven't decided fully yet, but they hold on to your passport in case they stamp a visa. In either case, you can do a pickup from a DHL spot or they mail your passport to you. So every single time I was put on administrative processing, I had to go to DHL to go pick up my passport. But unfortunately, because it was rejected, when I pick up my passport, there will be no visa in it. So by May 2019, I applied. I had a full scholarship. I had proof of funds. But for some reason, because it was in Lagos, and Lagos has a higher rejection rate compared to other consulates in the country, like in Abuja, I got denied again after being put on administrative processing. So I decided it was time to switch up my strategy. So like, okay, it looks like Lagos is bad vibes. And I went ahead to schedule the interview for June. So June, exactly right next month, I scheduled another interview for US visa, but in the Abuja space. So I went to Abuja for my third visa interview. Again, I got put on administrative processing with my full scholarship. And this time it was for much longer. It was for almost a month. But I somehow had this weird confidence or faith that I was going to get it. So even though my stuff was on administrative processing, I went ahead and I bought my flight tickets to the US. I put a date down. I said, August 11th, I'm traveling. And I went ahead and purchased my flight ticket without even getting the visa. I know, crazy. So fast forward to July 23rd, almost a whole month after going for the visa interview, I check and my visa was approved. I went to DHL and picked up. And mind you, this was just less than 3 weeks to the date I had already booked for my flights. So I was lucky enough to get the visa on the third try. I traveled on August 11th and then August 12th. And when I arrived at NYU, it was a very good experience for me. I worked with the admissions team. I helped thousands of students in the past 2 years to in the application process, helping a number of people secure admission in NYU and abroad. And I'm sharing this story. I'll share this process with you guys on this call to let you know that it is possible and it's a full-time effort. Not everybody's going to go through the same path I did of being rejected for visa interview twice and getting on the third time in a space of 6 months, which is almost unheard of, even with a full scholarship. And at this point, I'm not opening up to any questions anyone might have, and we can kick it off from there. I see we have Onyeka on the call, we have Eva, we have Israel, we have some people on YouTube. So if you have any questions, the floor is open. Happy to dive into any segment of the application process, either getting your GREs, your TOEFL or IELTS, how to build a strong application, and if requested, you can also schedule a one-on-one call with me for one-on-one call for visa application or master's application. All right. Any questions? All right, so I'm going to leave the floor open for about 4 to 5 minutes to pull in any questions. And let me know if you have questions. If there are no questions, this stream is going to be available on my Supercare page. It's also going to be available on YouTube, so you can always like watch it, rewatch it, share it, and I'm available online. I'm going to put up my social media handles on the screen. Um, in case you want to get in touch here. All right. Well, thanks guys for showing up. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to have more of this series coming up in the next couple of weeks to help guide through the application process. On the screen, you have my social media handles. You can reach out to me personally. You can schedule a one-on-one call. I'm more than happy to help you in your application process, helping you find the right school, helping you through your application process and putting together a strong application that not only gets you admitted but gets you funded. And wish you have the great rest of your day and have a great weekend and a great week ahead. Cheers.